I worked the rigs in Midland County 3 summers running. Nights out there are nothing like nights in town. The lights go down, the machines keep their slow sea sound, and your breath makes those little clouds that hang in front of your face. You learn to trust the man on the next shift, because if you don't, people get hurt. And if someone gets hurt, you don't get to go home. That's where the talk about the tallyman started for me. Low, half joking, the way men tell the worst things. He shows up on night shift, old Harris said the first time I heard it. He had oil under his nails and a coffee in a styrofoam sleeve, and he said it like he was remembering someone he used to work with. Thin, smells like old paper and rain. Carries a clipboard. Adding names, he smiled at that last part like it was a punchline. No one else smiled. Like a union man. Somebody joked. Hell no, Harris said. Union man's got paperwork that gets you paid. This one takes you off the page. That's how the story got started. The missing kept happening in smaller towns, until the story traveled like a slow sickness. People said he looked like a man but moved wrong. They said his handwriting was tiny and patient. Mostly they said one thing that never failed to make the hair on the back of your neck stand up the instant he writes your name. You stop existing, not dead, not missing, just gone. Payroll shows a blank where you were. Your kids' school photos have a hole. Your truck becomes someone else's truck in the lot. Everyone else forgets you unless they saw it happen. That last part, the witness rule, fixed the little logical hole everyone had about the story. If the tallyman erased people from existence completely, how did anyone ever remember him? If no one remembered your partner, how would the story carry on? The rule's ugly and simple. If you saw the tallyman writing a name, if you saw someone vanish in front of you, you remember the thing that took them until the thing comes for you. They say he was born at sea. That's what the old-timers added at the trailer, like an origin myth to make it older and more dangerous. Back when ships kept chalk tallies of crew, marks that meant a man was on board, storms would wipe the boards clean, the names lost to water and the mouths that should have called them.
The souls that had no one left to speak for them pooled in the cold places between tides. For a long time, a lot of misery and forgotten names gathered there, and something formed out of it. It learned to count. It learned the shape of saving and not saving. Then men moved from sea to land, chasing other fortunes, oil, rail, coal, and the forgetting followed. The tallyman came inland like a tide. We said it like that. A ledger made of grief. Nothing biblical about it. Just a man made of ledger ink and the world's carelessness. That's why he walks the rigs now, they said. Places where names get reduced to numbers on a pad, where nights swallow faces and the sun forgets to shine on you if you don't show up. When Pete vanished, I remember exactly where I was. We were 3 weeks into a shutdown, fixing a pump that had gone noisy on the night shift. The air was still, the kind of still that hums in your ears. Pete was on the catwalk, laughing about a busted hose, holding a beer he wasn't supposed to have. I was hunched on the catwalk with grease on my gloves and a flashlight between my teeth when I heard footsteps behind me. The boards creaked under them, neat and sure. "You all right?" I called without thinking. The man stopped and said, "Almost done," and then, nothing. It happened quiet. No crash, no shout. 1 second, he was there, laughing about a busted hose, and the next the space beside the pump was just empty. The beer he'd been holding sat balanced on the rail, fizz dying out. I kept waiting for the sound of a fall, a splash, anything, nothing. "Pete!" I yelled. The word sounded too small against all that machinery. I walked the catwalk twice, checked below, even swung the flashlight across the waste pit. The beam just caught rain mist and metal. No footprints, no drag marks, like he'd stepped off the world. I ran back to the shack, half sliding on the steel. "Have you seen Pete?" I asked the guys on shift. They looked at me blankly. "Pete who?" Harris said.
"Come on, Pete. 2 kids, drives that old Ford, always smokes on break." Harris frowned, searching his memory. "Man, you been pulling doubles. We ain't got a Pete here." I stared at him until my throat closed. The radio crackled, some weather alert about a dust front, and just like that the conversation ended. Everyone moved on. I tore through the lockers. His was there, only it wasn't. Empty, unlabeled. Even the dent I'd noticed last week was gone. Payroll had no Pete. Safety logs skipped a number, like a page missing in a Bible. The next morning his truck was gone from where he'd left it. The lot had its usual confusion. Folks forget where they park after a 12, but this felt different. That's when the fear really set in, not the kind that makes you run, but the kind that makes you stay because you need to prove the world is still solid. I drove to the diner we'd eaten at 3 nights earlier. Same waitress. I asked if she remembered the guy with me, tall, shaved head, dirty coveralls. She blinked. "You came in alone, honey." I saw Bob and Rhodey sitting there having beer with steak. I asked them, but it was like everyone just rehearsed the same answer. I kept talking until my voice hurt. "You worked with him last month. You lifted that pipe in 3. Lunchbox had his name." I named the job he'd done. I named the kids he mentioned once. The more I talked, the more they looked at me pityingly, like I was telling a ghost story too late for coffee. This is when I understood that every tale is true. I recounted the worst rule. If you saw the vanishing, you were the only one who would remember, and that memory marked you. It put a ledger line across your life the way a stamp will mark a check. People would call you paranoid. You'd start seeing ledger marks in things you used to trust, photos, pay sheets, your daughter's old library card. You would be the story that kept the story alive until the tallyman came walking down the catwalk to your name. I started looking for traces. I combed the truck lot. I combed the payroll. I combed my phone until my thumb ached. I found other things. A pile of old safety logs tied up in a box in the supply room, with the corners eaten like someone had started at the margins and worked inward. Faded Polaroids with blank streaks. A lunchbox with a name ground halfway out. Once, in a drain, I found a little white bone, tiny, like from a child, laid in the mud like a marker. When I told Harris about it, he went very still and said, "Don't go looking in drains." The nights got worse. At first it was small, hearing a pen that wasn't there, scratching like someone filling a ledger in the dark. I'd go into the office at 3 in the morning, and the projector would be on, showing a list of names I didn't recognize. A slow scroll of digits and shadows. Once, at the edge of sleep, I thought I saw someone standing in the floodlights across the pad. A shape pale as a ledger page. I blinked, and it was gone.
Then dreams. Not full dreams, really. More like memories that didn't belong to me. I'd be a boy on a ship watching chalk marks wiped clean. Or I'd sit in a dark union hall as men's names faded off a board. Each time, I woke up with the taste of salt like an old wound. Sometimes I felt hands like cold paper, closing on my shoulders in the dark. Pete was the first person I could prove I'd seen vanish. Afterwards, I started hearing about others from the barbs of rumor. A third shifter who'd missed a step, and the next morning his bunk was empty and his last name vanished from the roster. A welder's daughter who didn't exist in a photo album the family kept for years. Names started to look like fragile things to me, like paper in wind. I went back, shaking. Every road sign looked wrong, every mile marker new. In my phone's photos, the seat beside me was empty. Even the reflection in the window showed only one cup in the holder. For 2 days, I barely slept. I started searching online. Oilfield disappearances, tallyman, men erased from payroll. Nothing useful, just a few ghost forum posts, a Reddit thread that ended mid-sentence. But one link led to an old newspaper clipping from 1958. Inspector found dead after rig collapse. Names missing from record. The article mentioned a company man keeping tallies right before the blowout. The reporter died a week later. I printed the article, circled the line. The paper smelled like rust. That night, the printer in my motel room started up on its own and spat out a blank sheet with a single, straight black mark across it. The next few nights were worse. Tools shifted places. My radio would whisper names I didn't know, and then fall silent. Once, the rig alarm sounded at 3:17 a.m., but the panel showed no fault. When I checked the pad, the air smelled like rain, even though the sky was clear. In the condensation on a tank wall, someone had traced a line down the middle, one side clean, one side smeared. Harris said. I needed rest. Maybe he was right. I had been pulling doubles for quid some time. I needed all the money I can get to put my Nora in the private school. But this is not the first time I am doing doubles. I have doing it from the last 10 or 15 years. I never had trouble sleeping, but this time when I closed my eyes, I saw ledger paper and thin handwriting crawling across it, adding names I couldn't quite read. I stayed late again, half hoping to see something that made sense of it all. The field was black, windless, stars sharp as nails. I was tightening a valve when footsteps came along the catwalk, neat, measured. "You all right?" I called. A voice answered, "Almost done." It was the same voice I heard when Pete vanished, and then I saw. A tall, narrow man stepped into the floodlight, coveralls, clipboard, eyes that looked like they'd seen too many ledgers. He smelled of oil and damp paper. "You knew?" I asked. "You with inspection?" He tilted his head, glanced at my name tag, and started to write. Tiny, patient strokes. "Who are you?" He smiled, friendly as a funeral director. "Tallyman," he said. "I count what stays." His voice had that dry, paper-on-paper sound. He closed the clipboard softly and nodded, like we'd finished a transaction. I backed away. What happens to the ones who don't stay? He didn't answer. He just looked at the pump behind me and wrote one more line. The pen scraped once, that soft terminal sound, and the floodlight flickered.
I turned to look. The valve wrench I'd been holding a second ago lay on the grate. For a moment I thought I saw another shadow beside mine, thinner, fainter. Then it was gone. He walked past me, slow and deliberate, boots leaving no oil print. The air smelled like copper and rain. Then nothing, no footfalls, no breath, no world. When the light steadied, I was alone. It's worse in the nameless, the place he takes you to. When my name finally went on the list, it was almost quiet. I felt the pen like a cool stone press into the back of my neck, and then the world tilted, and the rig was wrong. The lights were the same but off, like a photo under a lamp. Men I'd worked with for years stood there, and I knew they should be warm and laughing, but their faces had that ledger smoothness, like they were being rubbed out around the edges. Then I saw Pete. He stood at the far edge of the rig as if he'd been waiting. He smiled that same dumb smile he'd had before he was taken. But the smile carried a weight that wasn't a smile, like a man who'd read a bad book and finally understood the punchline. "You don't get it," he said, and the voice was hollow, like something learned by repeating a word until it had no meaning. "You think it's a ledger. It's a hunger." Around us, and it was us, but not the rigs, people from different times stood shoulder to shoulder. Men with oil-stained hands and sailors with salt lines on their cheeks, and kids in little shoes from decades ago. Some wore the same rusted hats. Some wore uniforms that hadn't been used in 100 years. All of them had the same look, hollow-eyed, patient, like folks waiting for a train that never came. "This is Tallyman's place. It lives off the energy," Pete said, as if reciting something he'd learned in a class. "Once you're transferred, you're not taken. You're used. Your traces get chewed down until you're just a shape that remembers the pinch. He eats the part of you that's memory. It hurts like someone squeezing your head every moment. You forget your children first, then your favorite song, then how to spit. They keep you long. They like to let the forgetting swell." I thought of my daughter and the drawing taped to my dash, and I felt the cold reach up my ribs. Around us, some of the figures drifted toward the rail and pressed their hands to the metal, looking down like men who'd lost something overboard. "Can you get back?" I asked him. "Because you ask the thing everyone asks when you're trapped in a hole." He looked at me like a man who'd been asked to explain his own death. "Once, maybe," he said. "If someone out there remembers you enough to call your name, that's the trick. Memory is the only bridge." He sounded almost hopeful then, as if the idea of someone remembering was a small comfort. "Who remembers us?" I asked, my throat gone dry. He smiled that dumb smile. "Sometimes a mother calls her child back. Sometimes a son remembers his father. Mostly it's just empty. If nobody remembers, you unspool and then you're like this." He spread his hands, and something in his fingers looked like a dust of ledger marks. The knowledge felt like a weight. If someone out there called my name, maybe I'd go back. But names don't get called in a world that has folded you out of. People don't sing the names of those who aren't their neighbor's problem. Then he said something I didn't expect. He likes witnesses, someone to carry his tale. He gets his existence off the misery and pain we feel when we tell of him. Pete's eyes went thin. "You told them, didn't you? You told them about me."
I did. I'd told them. I'd been the one with the memory. I'd carried the tale in the way a smuggler carries contraband, and that's when I understood the cruelty of it. We kept the tallyman alive by telling the story. The only reason the story survives was because the witnesses exist, and the witnesses keep the ledger hungry. Then I saw him clearly for the first time. The tallyman wasn't a man at all. He was a shape that refused to stay, one shape, a body made of black, tar-thick fluid that dripped and folded back into itself. Faces bloomed across his surface, hundreds of them, appearing and dissolving like bubbles breaking a dark tide. Men, women, even children, their mouths open in silent screams. Every time one surfaced, a wave of emotion hit me: sorrow, rage, guilt, despair. It was like standing in the middle of all human regret, the air vibrating with grief. He moved toward me without walking. The air seemed to carry him. The sound came next, that same dry scratching, the pen that never stopped writing. Each stroke wasn't sound but pressure, a vibration in my skull that made my vision pulse. When he stopped, the pain began. It started like a headache, a knot behind my eyes. Then it grew. The world tilted and I felt something reach into me. Not hands but gravity itself, pulling pieces of thought loose one by one. My memories went in order, smallest to largest. The smell of coffee, the face of a friend, the sound of a song. Then heavier things. My daughter's eyes, my wife's laugh. It wasn't fading, it was being squeezed out, like something wrung dry. I fell to my knees, clutching my head, begging for it to stop, but the words came out thin, like air leaking from paper. The tallyman watched without eyes. His faces kept shifting, some pleading, some calm, some smiling faintly like they'd accepted it. I shouted, "Why are you doing this?" The sound of the pen paused, and for the briefest second, all the faces turned toward me. A single word seemed to roll through them in one shared breath: balance. Then the pain surged again, and everything went white. When I came back, I was lying on the deck of the rig. The sky above was flat gray, the kind that could have belonged to any hour, any year. The tallyman was gone, and Pete was standing near the railing, hands in his pockets, his face empty of expression. "You'll get used to it," he said. His voice echoed strangely, like it came from a tunnel. Around us, more figures stood near the edges of the deck, silhouettes of men I half recognized, all of them slow and distant, as if half asleep. Their outlines were faint, dissolving at the edges like mist. "How long has it been?" I asked. Pete looked out at the horizon, which wasn't really a horizon, just a gray smear fading into nothing. "Long enough," he said. "You stop counting. He feeds off the memories. The pain makes it easy for him." I looked down at my hands. The color was wrong. The skin had gone pale, almost transparent, and I could see faint lines underneath, like someone had drawn on me in pencil and started to erase it. I tried to remember my daughter's name, but the sound slipped away before I could finish it. The loss hit harder than the pain. Pete watched me struggle. "You won't remember what you lost soon. That's how he keeps you quiet." I don't know how much time passed after that. Time doesn't behave right there. Sometimes I thought I heard other voices from far below, whispers, sobs, fragments of laughter, all of them blending in a sound like running water. The world had no wind, no sun, just that endless low hum and the smell of oil and rain that never fell. Then, one day, something cut through it. It was faint at first, a soft static from nowhere, like a radio trying to tune in through the noise. Then I heard the words, small, trembling, but bright and familiar. "Dad, Dad, where are you?" I froze. It was my daughter's voice, clear as daylight. Every part of me that still remembered her snapped awake. I could see her again, the curl of her hair, the necklace she never took off, the way she'd grin when she was trying not to laugh. The sound of her voice carried warmth into this place that hadn't known warmth in forever. Pete turned toward me, his expression unreadable. "You hear her?" he asked. I nodded. My chest hurt in a new way. Sharp, alive. "Then go," he said. Before he notices, the gray around us began to tremble, as if the air itself had become liquid. I felt something pulling at me from deep inside, a force that didn't belong here. The pull got stronger and the light changed, shifting from dull gray to something almost white. My feet left the deck. The others watched, but none of them moved to follow. "Dad," the voice called again. "Dad, it's me, come home." The pool turned into a rush. The deck, the sky, the figures, all peeled away like layers of wet paint. For a heartbeat, I saw her standing in the kitchen, sunlight on the counter, pancakes on a plate, syrup on her hands. She reached for me, smiling, her hands small and real and warm. Then everything shook. The kitchen flickered, her face blurred into white, then black, then white again. Somewhere behind it all I heard a faint scratch, the sound of a pen finishing its line. Everything went quiet. Maybe she pulled me out. Maybe that was just the last flicker of my mind, trying to give shape to the light before it went out. I don't know. I only know that for a moment, I felt something that wasn't pain. If you ever find a photograph with a pale line scored in one corner, say the name written on the back. Say it loud enough for memory to hear. It might be mine. It might be Pete's. It might be whoever comes next.